This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my streaming video service Nebula when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description. Well, the Belgian Grand Prix has come and gone again, with Max Verstappen leaving a sizable boot print across the whole track, having looked entirely unstoppable despite taking a back of the grid power unit penalty. He could have started from Hungary and still made his way through to the lead. But Max Verstappen wasn't the only driver to start from the back of the grid, with Norris, Ocon, Zhou, Schumacher and his championship rival, in courtesy only, Charles Leclerc, all being sent to the supposed back of the grid. But they couldn't all start from the back of the grid. There's only one back of the grid slot. So let's start with a little refresher on how power unit penalties work, especially as we're now in that part of the season where people are going to be exceeding their power unit element allowances a little more readily. So power units. To stop teams spending an absurd amount of money blasting through power unit bits that are only designed to last a single race, there is an overall limit on how many of each power unit element can be used across the season. Over the year, each car can use 3 fresh elements each of the internal combustion engine, the MGUs, K and H, and the turbocharger. The energy store, or battery, and the control electronics each have an allowance of 2, and the engine exhaust systems have limits of 8 fresh elements. If at any point in the season a car takes fresh power unit elements that goes over its allowed limit, that's where penalties come in. And penalties come in 2 flavours. If this is the first time that specific element goes over its limit, you get a 10-place grid penalty. After that, every time you take a new version of that element, it's a 5-place penalty. If you replace a whole bunch of elements in one go and the penalties add up to more than 15 grid slots in total, then this gets turned into a back of the grid penalty. You're going to get sent to the back of the grid. This is instead of how it worked previously, where drivers could amass huge grid penalties, sometimes 50, 60, 70-place grid penalties, which was very silly. And you could think that if a car already has a back of the grid penalty, you could just keep changing power unit parts through the weekend without further penalty. Just change the combustion engine 3, 4, 5 times and now you've got all those engines in your pool without punishment, right? Well, no, because if any driver introduces more than one of the same power unit element, which is subject to penalty, only the very last one can continue to be used later in the season without further penalties. So, if you want to use these ones again, well, those will be hit with penalties down the line. Now, a funny little thing happened in Belgium with power unit penalties. Ferrari attempted to play silly buggers with the way they took penalties on Leclerc's car to avoid this back of the grid penalty so they could start ahead of Verstappen. So Verstappen and Leclerc's PU element usage before Belgium looked like this. Verstappen hadn't made any breaches but was up to the limit on his ICE, his MGUs and the turbo. Leclerc had breached the ICE, MGUs, turbo and control electronics already and was up to the limit on the energy store and exhaust. So, Red Bull chose to replace Verstappen's energy store and control electronics. Each of these is a first-time breach of that type of element, so each is worth a 10-place grid penalty. Added together, that's 20 places, 20 is more than 15, so Verstappen gets sent to the back of the grid. And as mentioned, Norris, Ocon, Zhou and Schumacher also had back of the grid penalties. So how do you resolve who starts ahead of whom? Well, that's done in qualifying. So these guys still have to fight it out in qualifying to start as high as they possibly can within their own group. Now Leclerc then. Ferrari changed his energy store and MGUK for FP1. The energy store was a first-time breach worth 10 grid slots. The MGUK, a second-time breach, only worth 5 grid slots. Together, that's a 15-place grid penalty. 15 is not more than 15, so that's not back of the grid. Then, in FP2, they changed Leclerc's control electronics, which is a penalty of 5 positions. Again, not more than 15, so that also doesn't reach a back of the grid penalty. So what Ferrari were wangling for is that in each bulk change of components, first the one in FP1, then the one in FP2, was a separate penalty. So Leclerc's penalty would be a 15-place drop, and then separately a 5-place drop. And these penalties would result in him starting higher than any car sent to the back of the grid. And the steward said, look, we get what you're trying to do. Yes, you could sort of read the rules that way if you want, but the penalties are intended to be read cumulatively no matter how you do them. So even if you accumulate grid penalties across various separate breaches of the rules, if they add up to more than 15, you will still get sent to the back of the grid. And this was the first time this had happened, so it's good to have it cleared up and have some precedent there. This means that a driver could have a 10-place grid penalty for power unit stuff, a 5-place grid penalty for like blocking in qualifying, and a 3-place grid penalty for, I don't know, something he did in the previous race. And as those add up to 18, the stewards would just send him to the back of the grid. So, once that was all cleared up, Ferrari just shoved in 5 new power unit elements for good measure, completing the set. So why did so many teams take power unit penalties here in Spa? Well, as I said, we're entering into that part of the year where power units are getting a little bit old and teams have to take a good, honest look at whether or not they're going to need to introduce new elements to make it through the rest of the season. And if you're going to need to breach your allowed limits, you should do it tactically. At Spa, you can overtake, especially with some fresh engine bits. I think we saw that aplenty with those forced to the back of the grid. And we got Zandvoort, Monza, Singapore coming up, all pretty tricky to overtake on, so why not take the penalties where their effect is weakest, because you won't be stuck at the back of the grid the whole race. As we saw, Verstappen actually won, and easily. That might not have been the case at any of the next 3 races if he'd had to start 6 or 7 rows back. Also, Belgium and Monza are power circuits that work the power units pretty hard, so it's good to get some fresh bits in there and take advantage. So Verstappen then. I mean, what can you really say? Absolutely unstoppable. He was fast across the whole weekend, but if we just look at his race pace compared to his teammate, the Ferraris and Russell, he was the fastest of all of them at basically every single point, other than the briefest of moments where his rivals stopped for fresh tyres. In his first stint on softs, he outpaced those on softs and mediums and took them further than any of his closest rivals, to lap 15. In his middle stint on mediums, he was about a second faster than Perez and 2 to 3 seconds faster than either Ferrari. He was still fastest on his final medium stint. Now you could say lap times seemed a bit tighter here, but Max was cruising in the lead at this point, having a lovely time. Even Leclerc's botched attempt at a last-minute stop for fastest lap didn't even come close to Verstappen's. He was 6/10 off on a softer tyre and a lighter car, though he had managed to get himself into an accidental scrap with Alonso, which didn't help. So let's talk about that last-second pit stop for Leclerc. Ferrari wanted to salvage something from a bit of a dire race in which Leclerc was running 5th, 4 places behind his so-called rival, having had nowhere near the pace to challenge the Red Bulls. Now, it's not unusual for teams to take a last-minute extra pit stop and go for fastest lap glory, but the key part of that decision is normally looking to see if there's a big enough gap behind you. You want to be able to get in and out of the pits without losing position, as track position is really the most valuable part of this equation. Leclerc was only 19 seconds ahead of Alonso, but Ferrari thought, no worries, we're so fast we'll just overtake Alonso straight away and get on with setting the fastest lap. So this was lap 43 out of 44, so Leclerc had to do 1 out lap and then set the fastest lap on the final lap. He had 1 chance. Unfortunately, Leclerc did not overtake Alonso on his out lap, so followed him all the way around the track through lap 43. Now we did overtake him on lap 44 down the Kemmel Straight, but it had already cost him by then and he didn't get the fastest lap. And then he got penalised 5 seconds for speeding in the pit lane in that last stop, and so lost 5th position to Alonso after all. So that last minute attempt at getting fastest lap didn't get Leclerc an extra point and actually cost him 2 points. It would be immensely funny if Ferrari suddenly got themselves sorted and had an amazing run to the end of the season, dominating the Red Bulls, only to lose by 2 points due to this error. Anyway, was this a massive blunder by Ferrari? I mean, it was a bit embarrassing and another notch in the bedpost of Ferrari's overall bad decisions, but I don't know. It was probably worth a go at this point with the situation they were in. Choosing to make an extra pit stop does come with a lot of risks. You could speed in the pit lane. You could have a slow stop with a stuck wheel. You could get stuck in traffic. It adds a lot of time to your race, and that's why teams favour as few pit stops as possible unless it's definitely faster to take more. Ferrari knew the risk, and God love them for trying. Now, if I were Perez, I might be a little downcast that my teammate, who started 13 places behind me, finished 18 seconds ahead of me and won the race. But you can see from the strategies that Max was always on the faster tyre, and he was the faster driver this weekend, and he did make the most of opportunities given to him. Leclerc actually ended up having the most interesting strategy, as he essentially ran a one-stop on medium tyres. These little soft stint bookends are just flourishes. His race was essentially medium only. And slow. Interesting to briefly note that Russell was faster than Sainz for quite a lot of this race. Sainz outpaced him on the softs early on and had a good first few laps on mediums, but actually through most of the race, save for the undercuts from Sainz, Russell is running at a very good relative pace. And an error from him late on probably cost him from actually grabbing that final podium place, which would have been quite the boon for Mercedes after a bit of a dire weekend up to that point. They were slow, weren't they? Their raw power place was lacking, and this is abundantly clear through the speed traps. Now, speed is recorded at 4 places around a circuit, at the start of each sector, and through the speed trap at the top of Eau Rouge as they enter the Kemmel Straight. Let's have a look at the recorded max speeds of each car through qualifying. Now, over the finish line, the Mercedes didn't look too bad speed-wise, but we're basically right off the back of a tight chicane accelerating down a short straight, so this is really a traction zone. They're fine here. And at the end of Sector 2, yeah, the Mercedes look pretty good, relatively, second and third through the speed traps, but again, this isn't a full beans top speed zone. This is a medium speed corner where grip and stability are key. Now, if we look at the speed trap at the top of Eau Rouge, then the Mercs fall to 17th and 19th overall. They just don't have the top speeds, the horsepower, the slippery efficient aero. But it's not just aero power, as Albon and the McLarens are way ahead here. The Mercedes are actually the slowest of the Mercedes cars. Now, at the end of the Kemmel Straight, they've got a bit better, up to 6th and 10th best speeds, but are still significantly off Sainz and the Red Bulls. Leclerc had a bit of a ropey one here, to be fair. We've seen many times this year Mercedes seem to be able to make up for their raw, hot lap pace by the time they get to do that full race distance on a Sunday, and so it proved with Russell, probably getting the best he possibly could from that car, almost. I mean, a podium was possible, but it was very close. Hamilton, on the other hand, well, he made a big error, didn't he? On the first lap, he was chasing Alonso down the Kemmel Straight. Alonso covered the inside, so Hamilton darted to the outside. As they headed through Lecumbe, Hamilton attempts to pass around the outside, but squeezes Alonso. They collide. Hamilton's back wheel catches Alonso's front. Hamilton is launched, causing terminal damage, but Alonso carries on. And it's probably a just thing that Hamilton retired and Alonso was able to continue, because this was fully Lewis's fault this time. Alonso stays fully tucked to the inside, he's in control, he's holding that tight line, and Hamilton just pinches him, despite having a lot of room on the outside. And he was very lucky not to face a penalty. The stewards deemed it a first lap incident with a lot of movement relative to other cars in the first few corners, so gave no penalty. But to be honest, by the time they got to the Lecumbe chicane, Alonso and Hamilton were pretty isolated in their own battle. Hamilton wasn't exactly ducking and weaving between cars at this point, was he? He only had to mind Alonso. So, lucky to be unpenalised. From Hamilton's perspective, he says Alonso was just in his blind spot at that point and that he, Lewis, made an error turning across that hard. And Hamilton did pay the price in retirement, so ultimately I guess it's all square. Now, next up is the Netherlands, and I think we're now all just wondering when, not if, Verstappen will clinch that title. And while we're talking about reliably delivering at the highest level, you should really check out this video's sponsors, CuriosityStream and Nebula. Now, you might well have heard the chat about Nebula, a haven of content from independent creators like me who make videos, podcasts, movies that will bedazzle, educate, and entertain you. Creators on Nebula love exploring exactly what interests them and sharing it with you, whether it's an explainer video about Trump's current legal positioning, an in-depth exploration of Tokyo's railway network, or even a therapist taking a professional analysis of that Game of Thrones spin-off everyone seems to be watching. Whatever your passion, gaming, music, sports, politics, tech, art, whatever, there are creators on Nebula making just the kind of videos and content you will be well into. No adverts, no sponsors, just sit back and enjoy. You'll also find extended episodes and entirely original content that you won't find anywhere else, including entire Nebula original series for things that fit a little better outside of the YouTube ecosystem. And Nebula have partnered with CuriosityStream, giving you access to both platforms in one slim package. CuriosityStream is that documentary and non-fiction streaming service that gives you original films and series that will titillate all of your brain parts, no matter what your interest. If you're into true crime with a stylish twist, check out Art of the Heist, a series covering a number of real-life heists and the subsequent investigations and fallout. And if you want access to all of CuriosityStream and all of Nebula, then it's very, very simple and amazing bang for your buck, really. Just sign up to CuriosityStream, and then you'll get access to Nebula for free as long as you're a CuriosityStream member. And that's all. If you use the link in my description, curiositystream.com/chainbear, you'll get 26% off the annual plan, which means you'll get both platforms for the whole year at just $14.79. And lots of people have said to me in the comments, actually, they have used my code and they've been enjoying the platform. So, ringing endorsement.